it's a wonderful feeling to know that your heart could be entwined with someone else, and it takes you to a higher power. It takes you to a different place. And so there again, it's what the only thing I would say is, if you really have to make sure that the person that you're with is not out for scamming. You know, that's why we put everything on the line. This is how much money I have, this is what I do, this is how I have it, this is how I spend. He did the same thing. And when a person is not afraid to present themselves fully, they will also present themselves fully in a sexual situation.
Hello, everyone. This is Ron Rowell. I'm your host of 45 Forward, where my mission is to help you make the second half of life even better than the first. What do you do when you've been married for many years and find yourself alone after losing your partner? Can you find love again? Companionship? Intimacy? A new sense of purpose? Today we'll meet Diane Olvera and Lee Sweeney, who did lose their longtime spouses and unexpectedly found themselves starting over in the same retirement community in Colorado. Today we're going to talk about a number of interesting things. First of all, how do you break through the initial fears and concerns of, meeting somebody new, getting to know them, working out things from very different backgrounds, and sustaining a new relationship, the lessons learned, a new way of understanding relationships, respect, and growing as we age. It's a great story. So now let's meet our guests, Diane Olvera and Lee Sweeney. Diane and Lee, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you guys. So let's start from the beginning of your meeting, sort of that initial story of what were some of the things you thought about, your initial impressions, what struck you about your early encounters, and remember your feelings of apprehension and also a little bit of hope and anticipation. So Diane, I'll start with you, and then Lee, you jump in.
Well, actually, we met each other through a mutual friend. We were at an Oktoberfest.
Mm-hmm.
We were introduced, and we spoke briefly, and then we saw each other again. It was 2020, so that's when COVID was out.
Oh, mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we had grief meetings that were available for us.
Interesting. Okay.
And so Lee was sitting across from me, and I think he mentioned a few things about his past,
Mm-hmm.
which was very similar to mine.
Mm-hmm.
And after the meeting, we started to chat. Right?
I went right over to her and said, "Yours is more complex than mine was."
Right. So, but there are some initial issues that you deal with. I sort of said, well, there are the usual things in relationships, sort of like money, sex, and values. So talk about some of those initial concerns in these issues. And I know that, again, Diane, you mentioned that I think is sort of normal. Probably, I'm not sure for women more than men, but I think there is that feeling of disloyalty to your former spouse. So
That's
talk about that.
Yes, both of our partners died within 2 months of each other.
Hmm.
And then it must have been about 4 months afterward we really started to meet each other, talk, and go to each other's apartments and have lunch or dinner. And then we started to feel more engaged with each other, and I felt really guilty.
Mm-hmm.
And the phrase that kept going to make me feel good was, "Till death do us part."
Ah.
And death had happened. But I talked to my counselor. I had been seeing a counselor throughout the
Mm-hmm.
time of my husband's sickness. And I said to her, I said, I just feel so guilty. This seems so right, but so wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she said, people that have had good marriages or good relationships prior to the demise will usually look for another relationship. But those who have not will shy away from it.
And Lee, I know that you were involved in a lot of caregiving for your former spouse, and so I'm sure there was a lot of emotional connection that you had to sort of work through and sort of transference, or how do you get work into a new relationship?
That's right. My wife fell and broke her hip, and she was over 80 years old, and the statistics show they don't last very long after that. So basically, she fell July 4th and died on 17th of August. And then meeting Diane, we had so many things in common to talk about. It wasn't just because our spouses had passed on, but the kind of work we were doing, it was classified work. Hers was on the ground and mine was through satellites up in the air. But even though those are very diverse areas, we just had a lot in common, like eating and up and back out of bed at the same times, and religion, all those topics we did touch on, and we worked out all the details. Very smooth.
Yeah, which is something I think that people should think about. When you're young, you're working at your jobs, and you meet each other, you meet friends, but as you get older, you're isolated. Probably spent maybe the last 20 to 30 or 40 years isolated with you, your husband, your family, and your very close community. And then all of a sudden you're in this larger community alone. A lot of the people have moved from where they've lived for 30, 40 years into this community because their children live in the area. So it's pretty scary to, first of all, even go out to do anything with the people that you live with. And then, to make things worse, you meet somebody and they know that his wife died and your husband died, and they start to, talk. And, you start to feel like, okay, well, we're the outsiders, and do they like it? Do they not like it? And one couple who actually got together after we did, she was 90 and he was in his 80s, and her friends literally, they were very angry with her.
Really interesting. Yeah.
Yes. So she really she said that's too bad, and she just went on, and now they live together and they're very happy. So I think if we could give any advice to older people and older couples, don't worry about what other people say, because it's now people are seeing us and they want to emulate a relationship.
I think that there is this unfortunate stereotype or just assumptions like, okay, you get to a certain age, well, you had your relationship, and then that's it, and you don't grow anymore, you don't change. And I think too, actually, probably, I don't know what your experience has been with your children, but I'm sure there's some things to work out with your family too, and like, really, that mom or dad is going to have another partner? How dare you?
Oh, and even intimacy. Luckily I have a very open relationship with my youngest son, and so he'll say, "Yeah, and I suppose you're having sex too." And I said, and then he said, "Yeah, every day." So we we just said, "Oh well, it's our life, it's our happiness, and we know how sensitive life and death is." And with your son, it was funny because they live away from the area, and one of his sons actually came and visited us, and they stayed the whole afternoon, and we ate together, and we had a wonderful time. And then they came back again this year.
Yeah, there's a lot to work out, in the relationships earlier and later, in a continuing way. So, some of the things that we've talked about in our previous conversations are, as you mentioned earlier, there are certain assumptions. If you're with someone for a long time and then you're in no relationship, you sort of forget about how many things you kind of worked through, and you need to rethink. So
No,
some of them might. Go ahead, Lee.
Excuse me, I said, one of the things that comes up is I was living in a patio home separate. She was in an apartment that's double rent. And so one of the things we discussed, why don't we move in together? But we didn't want to do it on day one. So I actually told the management here, I said, I want to give up my patio home for a one-bedroom apartment down the hall from Diane. And they said, okay. So they rewrote my contract. So I signed up for a year. And I don't think we made it through the full year before I signed up with Diane for another contract, one-year contract in the two-bedroom place. So again, that was very smooth. But when you come into it, you say, "Are you going to do that?" And the answer was, "Never crossed her mind." But sharing expenses was like I had a car, she had a car, I sold mine. It was over, and so we share expenses there too.
Yeah, but that's something that you talked about. That some things you need to really put out in the open, and one of them is money. A lot of couples break up over money. So, talking about again, what are your assumptions? And okay, maybe I assumed that we'd split this or did that, but something you have to work out, right? You got to sit down and say,
You
Yeah.
really have to have an open conversation about everything. And we don't plan to have children. And why do we need to be married? Because we have all of the finances and all of our paperwork done for our family, our children, my children, and he has all the paperwork done for his family and his children. So there's no reason to mix, in our minds, finances, because it just adds another layer of possibility of issues.
Yeah, well, she told you I was a specialist. I work on spreadsheets. So I was a tax preparer in California years ago, bonded, all that. And anyway, so what I did is I have a spreadsheet, and all the expenses are receipts. They go into the spreadsheet. At the end of each month, we balance it out. If one spent more than the other, that one, gives a check to the other one. And we split the rent down the middle, the car expenses down the middle, and food, and some of the things we don't nickel and dime it, but just things like that, just keeping track, it stays in balance.
clarity is important.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
And
you're right.
specificity, yeah. And I think that, so in that regard, and in a different kind of area, but again, clarity in terms of, I know we've talked before, Diane, about, again, it's one of the concerns I think from the woman's perspective is, listen, I'm not going to come in here and be your worker bee in the kitchen here. So let's make that clear. So let's talk about the roles in terms of household chores and assumptions like that.
but let me intercept one thing first.
Okay.
I was not into yoga, and Diane is in it full gore. So it turns out she's been doing it for years, and I joined her. Well, I'm not quite as flexible as she is, but she can attest to it now that I look much better now than I did 5 years ago when we first met. And it's just something we do together.
But there again, that's a man's ability to be open-minded. Now, you work with a lot of people, Ron. How many men would acquiesce to even the idea of changing their diet or doing yoga? I'm not going to do that. I mean, that's not, they would just immediately just give it up. And no, he doesn't. And just like in the house, my husband was Latino, and so I was the subservient wife. I enjoyed helping him and giving to him. Well, then you get tired, and so at the end of his life, the last thing I wanted to do was to be someone's subservient wife, or friend, or lover, or whatever you want to call it. But when I invited him to make empanadas one day, he didn't leave the kitchen. He started washing dishes. He was actually my chef, my
Sous chef.
sous chef. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'd never even heard of an Argentine empanada, but that was what she was teaching me. I had the rolling pin and had to, undo the packages for the dough and figure out how to not have it stick to the roller and not make a big mess, that.
I think what really impressed me was I saw it as a sign of maturity. I don't mean old age, maturity. That a person can look beyond self and look at the whole picture, what needs to be done, and just do it. He actually taught me, because I didn't keep tabs anymore. You know, it was, there's a glass in the sink, put it away. And it really helped me to calm down. I was kind of aggressive at the beginning of our relationship because I had to be. You know, when you're working for 40 years and 20 of 40 as a caregiver, you know, you have to monitor and you have to make sure that everyone that is on his case is doing their job. So when he came in, I was still like that.
I had fun with her, like we're making empanadas and you have to cut the olives. She says, the olives are in the refrigerator. Well, I don't know about you. I can't find things in her refrigerator. There's a skinny, tall bottle behind two other things, and she says, how come you can't move things and find it? I said, hey, there's multiple shelves. What do I do? I just want you to say, where are the olives? It worked out fine.
But it wasn't grudge holding.
Yeah, and you have to let go of things and try new things. I mean, so you have to maintain a sense of curiosity and adaptability. I think it's hard. I think, well, people can, if they go to my 45forward.org website, they can see, I have the episode up there, but I have your backgrounds up there, so they can see quite a bit about your both of your very distinguished backgrounds, and you went through a number of things. But as you mentioned briefly, Lee, you were with some of the spy in the sky, and Diane was a spy on the ground. I mean, you had very different kinds of careers, but you have to find that common ground and also that common compromising sometimes. So you have to continue adapting in life, and it's like, well, I've got to think about, how, I think one thing, and I don't think it's just about older people, right? But I think a lot of people quite young get very stuck in their patterns and don't want to change. And you have to have some adaptability. You got to have that.
Well, I think it all goes down to maturity, but apart from maturity, it is the ability to know yourself. If you're secure in yourself, you are then secure in your environment or in any environment. And I think our backgrounds caused us to have to be able to roll with the punches. But in a relationship, I think it's even more important to just feel like I'm comfortable in me. That's what I find is very difficult with the women that I speak with, because they forgot who me was. They were the wife. And so their biggest fear is, how do I even carry on a conversation when my husband had all the things to add? And the men would do the same thing. They were afraid to come like to the men's group because their wives did all the talking. One man even said that to me. Yeah, he said, well, my wife does all the talking. Why do I need to go to a men's group? Because I don't have her to tell all the stories.
So you're really not aware until you're in a new environment of all the roles you had and didn't have. And I think that is a problem when people then become suddenly independent or suddenly solo again. It's like not realizing how many things that were partitioned, and one did one thing, and I think that happens quite a bit, actually, unfortunately, in the area of money, when the male spouse passes, and then the woman realizes, God, I don't know anything about the money in this family or the estate. So it's important to share these kinds of things, and going forward. So you guys are now you're learning about this and sharing. I think that's really important.
Yeah, another thing we're sharing, this is, she accuses me of reading her mind. Like something needs to be done, and I do it just as she's about to ask me to do it. I said, I'm not connecting to your mind directly that I'm aware of. But again, it's awareness, like maybe you just anticipate what comes next. And I was where she didn't used to have anybody doing that with her.
Yeah, actually, we both said that we've never met anybody so in sync intellectually as well as just cognitive, on that cognitive layer, that they just kind of know, what the other person needs or at the moment. And I think if I can tell you what it is,
brain research.
Yeah, my brain research. Yeah, it's awareness. When you open your awareness, you then open yourselves to opening all of your senses. And when your senses are open, you feel life more, you see life more, and you become attached to the real world around you. And that opens up so many doors. One lady, when we gave our talk the other day at our where we live, she came up to us about a week later and she said, "I have to tell you, when you said open your awareness," she said, "I went home and I started to realize I say things without thinking." And her husband just had this biggest smile because it was like, "I know." She said, "Now I realize that I have to think before I say something to someone because I might say the wrong thing."
Right, right. So we're going to talk a lot more about that and your also your book, Diane, The Power of Connection. Before we get to that, I want to talk about something that is sensitive to talk about. You know, you guys have gone through it, which is, you know, especially as you get older. We touched on it earlier, but the whole issue of intimacy,
Yeah.
and you know, how do you create a new intimacy, and it's risky. And so I wanted to actually mention something that you guys have told me before, which is I put in just sort of, you know, quotations, the kitchen hug.
Yeah, well, she had me into the kitchen, you know, to learn how to make empanadas. And I'm not sure it was on the first day I was with her in the kitchen that I hugged her, but we were doing things routinely, whether it's loading and unloading the dishwasher or just cooking and preparing meals. And it just crossed my mind she looked like she needed a hug. So I gave her not just a hug, but a real good hug.
Real good hug.
She hugged right back, and I said, "See, that was like a test. She could have said, 'Get out of here.' I don't want that." But instead, she hugged me back. So it was that straightforward, but it was spontaneous. I didn't plan ahead. I didn't say, "Oh, now's the day for a hug." It just happened in the kitchen where we spent time together.
But you know, that releases oxytocin.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also, it improves your health.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it increases the ability to, you know, cure viruses or whatever you want to think about.
Right. Right.
So the hug was fine. The first kiss was not so fine. When I went to his house, he invited me up, and I don't know if it was before. I think it was before or after I think it was before. He said, "May I kiss you?"
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what to do. I hadn't had that situation in 40 years. So I puckered up. And afterwards he told me, he said it was like kissing a walnut. The shell.
No, but again, see, I didn't anticipate anything about good or bad. I just thought I would like to do it because I was getting along with her, and I think it was the second time I invited her to the patio home where I lived. And so when she was taking her coat off and hung it up, I just looked her right in the eye and said, "May I kiss you?"
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the first kiss was.
Mm-hmm.
Without no hugs or anything. Then we went about eating lunch together or whatever it was, the reason she came over.
But then you talk about intimacy, you know, from a woman's perspective, our bodies are not the same as it
Right.
was when we were 40 years earlier. And so one of your fears is, how do you disrobe
Oh, yeah.
and feel comfortable knowing that you're sagging and you're not that beautiful body that you were 40 years before? And so that was difficult, and for men, Joanne, and for men, it's will he be able to perform?
Mm-hmm.
And what can you do to enhance performance at our age so that you're able to perform?
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't like I was diagnosed as any malfunction. It was just she saw an ad on the paper about acoustic wave therapy, which I'd never heard of.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a local place that just opened and it said, "We have a special going on." And so we went in together, you know, and I got examined and said, "Yeah, you're a candidate if you'd like to do this." So I signed up. And I think it was 6 weeks in a row I went in for acoustic wave therapy treatment, which is sound waves. And I didn't say it was like day and night, but it improved our performance. And the thing I signed up, and they said, "You can come back once a year for a tune-up if you like." So the next 2 years I went in for a tune-up.
Yeah.
And then the next time I tried to go in, they didn't answer the phone. And when I looked up their nearest office, it's in Salt Lake City. I said, I'm not going over there for that.
Right. Yeah. But I think that openness and that, willingness to recognize it's not the same, but you can do a lot of things to improve it and make it great. I mean, I think that I think what you're saying, Diane, is I do think that there's sort of more, unfortunately, societal pressure on women somehow to be, to maintain physical appearance, but men sag too. And I think that, you do, well, I'll speak for myself, Lee, I'm like, who's that in the mirror? Wait a minute, that's me? Okay, or you look at somebody and say, well, they look kind of old, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm older than they are, so how do I look? So I think that, but just being comfortable, it's okay, it is what it is. Sometimes it's fine, sometimes it's like, well.
The thing too is, what do you do when your relationship, your prior relationship, physically, sexually, was in demise? So you you got out of practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so there again, we find open conversations really do help.
Yeah. Let's talk more about that. That's a good segue to the next section about the importance of communication. Now, you have a book. You've had a number of books, but I think most recent one is dealing with the power of communication. So let's talk a little bit more about that, about just the ability, to communicate. I think you told me once that you and Lee, you said, we're a good team. We look at each other and talk, But I think that ability to really be open about a lot of things, personal issues, health problems, financial issues, and to look for ways of finding, common ground, or at least common understandings to resolve things, because there could inevitably be differences. So how do you resolve them? Understanding each other's position, and basically being able to both be together and maintain, independence.
Well, we call it word power. Our words have power. And it actually sets the domain for where you are. So when you are always talking, like telling him what to do, telling her what to do, you're dominating. So when you have word power, you open up conversations and you use your awareness to find positive things. Like, hey, thank you so much for helping me in the kitchen. I didn't expect that. Now, that was silly. That was very nothing. But yet it was, because it made him feel felt. And then using your eyes. How often do you walk into the house and say, hi, honey, and don't look at them, and just walk into the bedroom, change your clothes, whatever? They don't feel felt. So we really make an effort at just looking at each other and making him feel like his conversation is important to me. And so that opens up the door for communication.
Sometimes, men are not quite as practiced. I think, I do think, for better or worse, in the workplace, there are power dynamics, and so you don't really work at that level of collaboration, and basically working out things like, well, are you higher or am I higher? So, but then one of the things you mentioned to me, Lee, previously, was that you joined a men's group. So tell me a little bit about that. What have you experienced, and what did you get out of that, or maybe still getting out of
The
it?
facility where we are currently has 44 men in it, and what they want is more than what we have now, which is like a dozen that come. But you would think, like, what do they talk about? Well, it could be current events like politics, religion, things like that. But usually it's just something that was funny they did when they were younger. And I heard some stories I just couldn't believe what they would do. Like one man lived in Massachusetts, the other in Denver, and what do they do? They skip school, take a train to go see a baseball game in another city. I said, I never even thought of doing that. But it wasn't, they didn't tell it to be funny. That's just the things they were doing. And that was kind of entertaining where everybody's like, gosh, I wish I did that.
But I think
Yeah.
they also, every once in a while, you'll come back and he'll say, we did talk about some personal things or how people feel,
Mm-hmm.
especially when the guys are new.
Yeah, I mean, I know that, a lot of therapists talk about, okay, well, how do you feel about this? But I think there is something to that. You can intellectualize it, but then it sort of just stop and say, well, how do you feel about that? And I think because that's part of being open, and let's face it, it's also somewhat vulnerable. You've got to accept that kind of vulnerability as part of relationships, and that's what makes it risky, but that's what also makes it rewarding when you get through it. Yeah.
Well, one thing that kind of is a downer is some people that have hearing problems will either forget to put their hearing aids on, or they have been so accustomed to not hearing, but they don't want the other men to know that they can't hear them, so they usurp the conversation. They just go on and on and on and on. And so I think what sometimes like a moderator needs to do, know when to change the subject or move them away from their long verbiage.
Yeah, we do have a moderator who would try to come with something like if it's kind of dead silence and we're starting out, and he would say, "Oh, by the way, you all have had maybe a bucket list. Could you tell us something on your list you haven't done yet?" It turns out several men started on that topic, and again, another discussion would continue after that. So again, it does take like a moderator who's skilled at starting the thing rolling, and not always spontaneous just when people show up.
So, I mean, the things you're talking about, I think, are also things that affect a lot of people in terms of the communication issues. I think that you folks have mentioned to me that, well, you've given some presentations to people in your community about these issues, about communications issues. And I think, Diane, you told me that you met a woman who really felt isolated and felt, she didn't get out of her room. I think this is an issue, I think, that again goes back to it is related to growing older, and I think we get more isolated and feeling of insecurity. I think it's in part because there is, I think, an unfortunate presumption about seniors, that we don't count as much. There's a dismissive quality to older people, about older people. So talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
And it happened to both of us, and we're pretty lively. But one of my doctor said something. I got a letter about genealogical testing because of some background in my family, and the first thing that came out of her mouth was, "Hey, at your age," and I used one of the strategies from the book, and I used my diplomatic eyes. I looked straight at her, and I just said, "Really?" And she said, "But if you want to get it, that's fine." And from the rest of the time that we were together, and from then on, she has been extremely respectful of our age and how she talks with us. Because if you're 45, they're going to talk to you very differently than if you're 85. And so that was one of the things that I talked about in this presentation. We as older adults have to unite. And we have to show our power so that we are respected, again, by the medical community. and not dismissed because we're older. Why spend the money on medication? Why spend the money on this testing when you may have 5, 10 more years? But why don't we want 5, 10 years of good health rather than 5, 10 years of demise?
We would add something, Lee,
In 5 days, I turned 86. This one lady
Okay.
out there said, "Oh, it's your birthday." I said, "Yeah, I'll be 86 in a few days." She looked at me really serious. She says, "You don't look like 86 and you don't act like it." And I said, "Thank you very much." That was it. But that's nice. I mean,
And we have to do that with our children too, because it's the same thing. Oh, Mom, one day we had a cold or something, and our son works in healthcare. Well, your age, guys. And I said, no. At our age is the same as if I was 27, 37, 57, 97. What would you suggest that we take for a cold?
Right.
But we have to do that with our children because I think that they tend to feel that we don't have the intellectual capacity. And if we don't have it, then at least be able to have open conversations with us.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that there are two things strike me. One is that, I've had people say similar things lead to me like, oh, you're that age? Well, you look pretty good for that age. And my response is, what am I supposed to look
Exactly.
like? You so I think that, and there are stereotypes. And look, I do think back when I was, I guess maybe 10 or 11, and I was, when my parents would have cocktail parties in our living room, and I'd be hiding looking at the adults, and thinking, wow, these people are really old, and they were probably, 40, So, but I do think there is this, we have a really pervasive quality of ageism in our society. And some of that, yes, we do get older. There are things about infirmity, but I do think that, to your point, Diane, that from the medical profession perspective, as well as other social perspectives, we just have to be more inclusive. It's not the same, you're not the same at 87 as 7, okay? But we need to have a system that looks at medical care from a spectrum because you're aging from the moment you're born. So, but I do think that there is this, precisely what you said, which is, why bother? They only have a few more years. Yeah, they could be great years, and why don't they deserve to
But
enjoy
look
them?
at it, look what's happening in society today. Do you remember the old people, the old singing, the artists that were in our time, that were our great singers? They're all coming back. Barbara
Right,
Streisand's coming
right.
back, and some of the actors. I mean, they're 80, 90 years old, and they're coming back. So it tells me that the brain has the capability of continuing on, and we actually should be almost like the native tribes. We have the knowledge and the background and the experience. Why can't we pass that on so that you don't have to suffer as badly as we did when we
Right,
were going through
right.
that particular age?
Yeah, I think that there are cultures that have a much more um, experienced perspective on elders and aging and the wisdom of aging, and I think that we do have an infatuation with youth, um, and forget how much we didn't know when we were younger, and how much we do know now, and I think that going back to the science of it, I think that when they do problem solving, they find out that there are certain kinds of problems that younger people do better, do faster, and more effectively. But then there are other problems that involve kind of, using your memory and your experiences with other things to solve problems quicker than going through sequentially, one thing after another to solve a problem. So there really are, there is something to wisdom.
There are some studies, they're kind of controversial. It's called medial temporal myelination. So it's the middle
Okay.
part. It goes
Mm-hmm.
directly into the emotional part of the brain. And they say that's the last part to get this covering on the cells that take information a little more quickly into the brain. And
Mm-hmm.
that was talked about, probably about 5, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But what they came up with was they felt that as people get older, the information goes in a little bit faster and we make sense
Mm-hmm.
of it. And we can say, is that really important? And if you really
Mm-hmm.
look at people that are older, we will say things like, it's okay, it's not that important.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I would have gotten angry probably when I was your age, but is it really, can we relax with that? I mean, is there an
Mm-hmm.
easier way out? Or just let it
Mm-hmm.
ride?
Right.
And
Yeah.
if you really look around at people our age, we tend to do that. But we're not appreciated for it.
Right.
Voice of reason.
Right. So now we need a T-shirt saying, "I'm older.
Yeah,
Appreciate me."
right. My mind.
Right. Appreciate my
Yeah.
mind. Right. Right. Well, this has been great. What I want to do in our last few minutes is just to do a little bit of a wrap up in terms of, takeaways. So I just have a couple. Like, so for example, um, what would you say to what would be you'd say your one tip for someone who feels like, oh, it's too late to start over a relationship? What comes to mind? What would you say to them?
Well, I would look for something in common to talk about, and it just turned out in our case we had an overlap doing classified work of all things. Particular
Mm-hmm.
things that you had to do that most people wouldn't even know about. But as a topic,
Mm-hmm.
it's just interesting, or at least it was for us.
Well, I'm going to
Right.
go a different route. I'm going to say that from a
Okay.
health perspective, from an intelligence
Good.
perspective,
Uh-huh.
from a social perspective, that if you reach out, just take away that old facade that you don't want to go out, that
Mm-hmm.
you will then open up more, you will be happier, you will be intellectually stimulated, you might even find somebody to eat with, which is the loneliest
Mm-hmm.
part of the day. And
Interesting.
don't be afraid to come together and live together, because basically you're going to live longer because you
Mm-hmm.
take care of each other. We find that we
Right.
eat more, we eat better, we exercise more, and we help each other. I don't feel like walking today. Well, he'll say, no, I feel like it. So then all of a sudden I'm walking. But when you're
Mm-hmm.
by yourself, what are you going to do? You sit in a chair, have a
Mm-hmm.
cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and the day ends and you've done nothing. So
Mm-hmm.
even if it's,
Mm-hmm.
men living with a man or women living with a woman, we have
Mm-hmm.
like I think 2 or 3 cases here where just a couple friends got together, and it's cheaper, it's more productive, and it's safer.
Mm-hmm.
So my opinion is, why not?
Right. Okay. What about a specific area about of hesitancy about who feel we talked about intimacy. What would be your one thing like worry about intimacy? What's your tip about addressing that?
Well, love actually, and just even a hug increases oxytocin, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a wonderful feeling to know that your heart could be entwined with someone else, and it takes you to a higher power. It takes you to a different place, and so there again, it's what the only thing I would say is, if you really have to make sure that the person that you're with is not out for scamming. You know, that's why we put everything on the line. This is how much money I have, this is what I do, this is how I have it, this is how I spend. He did the same thing. And when a person is not afraid to present themselves fully, they will also present themselves fully in a sexual situation.
So leave from a perspective of someone who was in a higher place working with satellites. What's one thing that comes to mind for you in terms of?
I think she really hit it with the awareness because I've been learning that from her. And of course, she did research in these areas and she applied it to me before I realized what she was doing. And it's in her book. Well, then, yeah, I was
It's
asked to
catchy.
proofread all her books, so guess what? I get to read it over and over again and give her feedback saying, did I understand it or could it be written a little bit better? So, and it's the same with the exercise, like you say, that's something that's quite common, and not that sex is considered exercise, but still to be healthy enough to do it. And so you have to be healthy enough and eat well. I mean, again, my diet is so much better. She's the researcher on what are we supposed to be eating.
Well, that's another piece, though. If you don't eat a good diet, how often do you go into aging retirement communities? When we speak to people that are at premium places, they want the people to be happy. So they provide pizza, breads, desserts, ice cream machines, and that's fine. But one of the ladies who actually we met the other day, she said, "That's fine, but what about health?" Well, they
Mm-hmm.
know that the older people will reject it because they're accustomed to meat and potatoes, so they're not going to
Mm-hmm.
make it. So that's the difficult part of going to a premium place or any place,
Mm-hmm.
but then eating maybe a healthier diet when you are maybe not looking for that. But what we found
Mm-hmm.
is by eating a good diet, we have more energy. If you have more energy, you feel like doing more. And when you do
Right.
more, you feel better.
Mm-hmm. So, what would you say was the most surprising adjustment you made in your relationships with each other that perhaps you didn't expect? That might be your ability,
Well,
but
I would say again, the frequency and accuracy of communication is really what it was. Like the first time I
okay.
invited Diane over and I served her red wine and she drank it. Later I found out she had stopped drinking red wine, which she likes. And then we've been drinking it together ever since. But see, I
Okay.
didn't know, and so it's just these things happen. But again, it's just being purely open and making sure we understand what we're thinking about and what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's calming. I didn't realize how uptight I was until I started
Mm-hmm.
to relax. He really taught me that I felt more secure, I felt more comfortable, and his speech patterns. His speech patterns. He's a softer spoken person,
Mm-hmm.
and that brought my voice down. And would we would just start talking more comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
And my son said to me the other day, he said, "Who are you?"
But it goes to, I think, something that you've mentioned me before, but that I think is important is that it's something you need to work on. I think the phrasing you used was um, connection. Connection is a choice and a practice.
But and this is actually, we've proven this. Speech patterns will change and people don't even realize it. Here's an example. If I'm going to turn the thermostat up or down, "Hey, I'm going to turn it up if you don't mind, I'm a little cold." And about 2 weeks later, he started using the exact same speech pattern. "Hey, I'm going to turn it up if it's okay with you, or I'm going to turn it down." And now we find ourselves using similar speech patterns. So if you're in an office, like you were telling me about office structure, if you start using positive speech patterns and utilizing the assets of each person that are in the office, then they start to see themselves as assets. And the whole vibe of the office and the domain will change.
So last thing I wanted to ask you. I really enjoyed this conversation. Um, uh, Looking back, um, say before 45 forward, what would you say to anything you would say to your younger self about what you wish you had known then?
I would say enjoy the moment. Don't worry what
Uh
other
huh.
people think. We were
Mm-hmm.
brought up in a very religious family, had to do everything correct. Now I realize that it's okay to make mistakes. What did you think?
Yeah, I think the thing I accuse myself of is being on the shy side. And even though I was an athlete in high school and college, I was in sports and did well. In so many other cases, if I was just a little more forward with what I was really thinking about in certain situations, if I didn't just clam up and not say anything. So I think I missed a lot of opportunities by not just being a little more open when I'm with people.
And now he's completely open.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes she has to pinch me in the leg. Come on
Yeah.
now.
No, he walks down the hall and talks to all the ladies and all the guys, where before he used to be very, very quiet and keep to himself. Oh my gosh, what did I create?
No, it's mutual though. When you do talk to the people, like the man across the way, he's in his middle 90s and he had cancer. And we asked him about it the last time I saw him, and this time he had an even bigger patch on his head. And I said, "What happened this time?" He said, "Oh, they're still exploring, trying to find where is it coming from and what's the next step." I said, "Well, I hope you're doing well." But he just really smiled just because, I stopped and talked to him.
That was just one real quick thing that we noticed here, is that people think they have to always say something positive, but really people feel felt if you say, "You look like you've had a bad night. Are you okay?" Even if you don't know that person. And they feel so loved that you'll see them almost following you down the hallway. Yeah, that's right. And if people that are they're selling, the idea of um, over 55 communities, if they could just learn these few little tips and then, just kind of start using it amongst people there, literally have a very vibrant community.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll just say one last thing about, caring and caregiving, which is, so I've have this book that I produce for family caregivers called the Caregiving Navigator. So it's literally for spouses and for adult children taking care of their older ones as they get older. But more broadly, as the more that I've explored this whole area, it's about how we care for each other in our society, and that's something that we don't really think about. But it's that sentiment of caring that goes so much further than just the physical or caring for eating and the physical, what they call activities of daily living. It's and it's something that I think is really important, and I think that is again going to our issue of sort of ageism of older people. It's as important all the way through life, and I think that you guys have shown that in caring for each other. So I really appreciate your conversation about that.
Well, we really appreciate you, and we appreciate you actually bringing all these issues to light. There aren't many programs or many people talking about this uh, that help us to define life after 45.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that might be your next book.
Okay. So listen, if people have questions or want to reach you, what's the best way to reach you guys? Is it do you have emails or social media, or what's the best way to if they have questions they want to follow up with you?
Well, we both have Gmail, so it's drdiane04@gmail.com.
Yeah, I think.
Right, but people should know it's Diane with two N's.
Yes, I got, you're so good, yes.
Yeah, and I also have similar accounts, but I think going all through Diane, she would benefit from having that flow go through her, so I don't have to forward it
Okay.
to her. Because we do share, and it would just save one step on my part, not sending it somewhere else.
Okay.
Yes, I do have a website. It's Dr. Diane, well, no, let's do this one. Word Power,
Press.
well, yeah, wordpowerpress.com.
Okay, good. They can learn more about your book and about all your other work. And then, as I said before, if they go to my website, 45forward.org, it'll take you to a list of all my podcasts, and yours will be near the top, and then people can read a little bit more about you and your background and so forth. And also for those who want to listen, as a podcast, who, they can, we can pass it along and they can listen to it. They can listen to it, and they can also watch it on YouTube. So there's a YouTube channel, 45forward.org YouTube channel. So again, thank you so much, folks. People can also send me questions and comments to ron@45forward.org. And so until the next time, folks, keep moving forward, 45 forward.